App from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store for breaking news, merchandise, films, exclusive content, and teamed email.
Today on the Dennis Michael Lynch podcast, we're going to talk to Dr. Colin Chiropractic, as far as I'm concerned. No, it's Colin Buck. He's here in my office. He's a friend of mine. He's also a guy that in many ways may have saved my life. He's going to talk to you about natural medicine, chiropractic, the U.S. health system, everything that you need to know about being healthy and maybe why you're not. So get ready, because it's all unfiltered.
Dennis Michael Lynch gives you his word, and he will never let you down. He will always fight for America.
The only one who really puts his money where his mouth is Dennis Michael Lynch.
Hello, I'm Dennis Michael Lynch, and I thank you for joining me today. So it's not often that I get to sit across a very handsome guy, somebody who's more handsome than me. So when I have that opportunity, I take full advantage of it. Colin, that's what we're going to call him. It's Colin Buck. It's Dr. Colin Buck, to be very professional about it, but I know him as Colin, and you know him as Dr. Colin. So going back about 6 months ago, obviously, I was crying into the microphone. I had all the different problems, stomach, dizziness, you name it. The list is long. If you've been with me for a while, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't been with me for a while, well, then I say that you should go back and look at the programs from August and September, and you'll know everything that I am referring to. With that said, I went everywhere. I went to the Mayo Clinic. I went to the University of Florida. I went to private practitioners. I went to clinics. I went to, you name it. I think overall I had probably 40 different tests. They went in and they checked my heart. They were doing things that say, Mr. Lynch, you could have a heart attack from this test. Everything to try to figure out what the hell was going on with me. And there were days, I mean, Ashley would tell you, she's here working the camera. There were days when I just thought that, I should probably start saying my last rites and pack it in, because I just could not function as a human being. I kept on sliding. So you may recall an interview we had a couple of weeks ago with an Alexandra Cochran. She said, you need to see this guy I know. His name is Colin. He's fantastic. He's holistic. He's a chiropractor. He'll change everything for you. So I kind of blew it off at the time. And then in total desperation, I said to my wife, why don't we call that guy Colin? And she said, okay. We called Colin. He came to my house. He sat down. He didn't say a word. He just listened, which is very rare, because if you ever sit in front of a doctor, they always have to cut you off because they got to get to the next patient. Well, this guy let me talk for almost an hour and a half, didn't utter a word. And then he spoke. And at that point, I think that's when all things in my life started getting better, because this guy made more sense than anybody else that I had sat with. And that's collectively, including the folks at the Mayo Clinic. So I have waited and waited until I felt it was appropriate to bring in Colin to speak about what he does, how he helps people, how he helped me. I don't want to make this all about me, and what it is that people need to know, because based on my experience with this man, we are doing so many things incorrectly in this country. So without further ado, Colin Buck is here with me. Hello, sir.
Good morning, Dennis. Thank you so much for having me. This is a great honor and a privilege, so thank you.
Well, let's see if you say that at the end of the interview. So why don't we start this, Colin? They just heard you talk, and obviously you're not from New Jersey. You're not from California. You've got the whole, I don't know, twang going. Why don't you tell us where exactly you're from and how it is that you got into chiropractic and holistic medicine?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do my best. Excuse me. I'm originally from Johannesburg, South Africa. I'm in the United States as a result of a scholarship. I came over in 1993 on a soccer scholarship. But my road to chiropractic and, I guess, vitalistic health was through a personal experience. I was 13 years old. I was arguably one of the better soccer players in South Africa at the time, in my age group. Excuse me. And something happened one day. I woke up one morning and my right knee was swollen. Just the insidious onset. There was no reason for it. And I went downstairs and I said to my mom, listen, something's wrong. Immediately, innately, I understood that something just wasn't right with me, and my mom, knowing how much I hated school at the time, just said, get back upstairs, go get dressed, you're going to school. So this happened the second day, but then it wasn't just the right knee, it was the left knee as well. And I went downstairs with the same story and she, blew it off. So on day 3, I had right knee swollen, right and left ankle swollen. I couldn't walk. So I went downstairs on my butt, basically, and I said, Mom, you need to pay attention. Something's wrong. And at that point, she recognized, and you could see the fear in her face and also a little bit of the embarrassment. But needless to say, she sent me back upstairs. And of course, who did she call? She called our medical doctor, right? And so based on the symptoms that she explained to them, he said at that time, just leave him in bed. I'll be at your house at the end of the day, and we'll evaluate him, which was great. Now, his concern at the time was perhaps a condition of the heart called rheumatic fever. And so therefore, he wanted me literally doing nothing. That's kind of where he was going. Did some blood tests, and literally the next day I was told that I have to go to the hospital. Now, for a family who basically never, ever looked at medicine as something that was for healthy people, right? They only thought it was for sick people. We had no medicine in our house, and it was never our approach. But of course, when there was crisis or intervention needed, that was kind of our thought around it. So of course, we went to the medical doctor. So off to the hospital we go, and not to make it a long story like you suggested, but about 30 days later, after literally doing nothing, everyone had to do everything for me because, again, of their concern of a heart condition. They came up with the diagnosis of juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. I was told soccer would never be a part of my life again, and that everything was going to change, and that at this very moment in time, they were going to start a protocol of cortisone treatment. And that was like the light bulb that went off in my mom and dad's head. They just recognized cortisone as something dangerous, something that would, potentially save or help people's lives, but they didn't see this for a 13-year-old child. And my dad was a very good amateur cyclist in South Africa, and probably, if there was professional at the time, would be one of the best professionals. But because of all these accidents or crashes, he saw a chiropractor, and he just said to my mom, listen, we have nothing to lose. Let's try something else, and I think we should try our chiropractor. And so they literally carried me out of the hospital, took me to a chiropractor, and he kind of gave a similar story to me about chiropractic and how it works that I gave to you on your initial consultation, and it resonated with all of us. And literally 6 months later, my life was completely different. A year and a half later, I was offered a trial in England at Fulham Football Club. And, I would not be sitting here today with you had it not been for chiropractic. I believe completely saved my life. And
wow.
Yeah.
So that experience is what led you, when professional soccer didn't happen, that experience led you to say, I want to be a chiropractor. I want to do the same thing for people that was done for me.
Yeah, I would say that was kind of the first seed that was planted.
Okay.
Later on, I was actually playing indoor professional soccer after college here in the United States.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no,
You never told me.
it's not a big deal.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
anyway, long story short is I had a concussion. That led me to obviously have to take some medication because I wasn't in a good place. The medication, I think, the side effects were affecting my gut, and some things were going on that were not enabling me to play. And I was the franchise player at the time. My coach was getting extremely upset with the fact that I couldn't get on the field. And I used to coach a young kids soccer team at the same time. And the manager of the team said to me, you need to go see my doctor, Dr. Kirk, and don't worry about anything, just go see him. And when I arrived at his office, I recognized he was a chiropractor. And I thought, okay, well, I'm here for a reason. And he changed my life. So, within 6 months, I was 100% off medication, doing well.
What was your feeling in your gut? But I don't mean your gut feeling. I mean, what was the actual feeling in your gut?
So in my gut, it felt like when I was running on the soccer field, someone was stabbing me with a knife. It was that bad. It was that intense.
In the front, in the side,
like
all
literally,
throughout?
yeah, in the front, in the middle of my abdomen.
Mm-hmm.
It was unbearable. And I did notice certain things that I ate, made it worse. So we recognized that the function of my gastrointestinal system, if you will, wasn't working properly. And he said to me, listen, there's areas in your spine where there's interferences to the nerves that communicate to the gut and to the gastrointestinal system that we need to correct. And he suggested some other changes that I needed to make. And once we did that, everything's history. And there's this amazing ability that the body has to self-heal, self-regulate. The question always needs to become, why is my body not doing that? And so once I started to recognize that when you ask those questions, your body heals every time. And so then I was a sales rep for a company called Vision, selling contact lenses. And honestly, I was selling chiropractic to the optometrist more than I was selling lenses. I wasn't very successful. And at the end of the day, I said to my wife, listen, there is something that I have to do. And she said, what is it? I said, I have to study chiropractic. This is my calling. I've been chosen to be a chiropractor, I believe. And I have to do this. Are you okay with it? And she said, absolutely. She said, let's see what it takes. And so we went to Life University in Marietta, Georgia, to figure out what I needed to get in, because I didn't do the pre-med classes. So I had to do a fast track of pre-med to get in. My original degree was in global business.
Mm-hmm.
And once we got into the program, it was it. We were never looking back.
So I want to go back to the stomach thing for a second, because obviously I can relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's a lot of people, Colin, that are listening that have those gut issues. I mean, when I was telling my story all the time on my podcasts, I was getting drowned in people sending me, oh my God, I've got the same pains. Oh my God, I can't get rid of it. Oh my God, they've put me on every drug. It won't go away. It won't go away. Please tell me what winds up happening. I mean, I can't get over the thousands. In fact, the funny thing is I never used to say your name. I used to call you Dr. Colin, and you told me a funny story that somebody just figured out where I live. Dr. Colin looked it up and reached out to you and said, please fix DML.
Yeah, exactly. There's obviously a lot of people who care very much about you.
So. Well, I appreciate that. But so a lot of times when you're getting a feeling of that pain in the stomach and it goes into the intestines, whatever, it feels as if, I mean, you can't walk. It feels like you can't breathe. It's so debilitating. Now, I understand somebody who has a heart attack, that crushing feeling must be a different level of pain. But out of all the different pains I've ever had in my life, the pains that I were having in my stomach, and it was just driving so many different other things. So what would happen is that all of a sudden my blood sugar would drop, and then I would start getting dizzy. And the kids would watch. My temperature was dropping because my immune system was going crazy.
Correct.
All of this stuff. And I mean, Colin, they fed me with so many different drugs and so many different tests, and I was exposed to so much radiation. I mean, it's always in the back of my head that radiation has done something to me. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's funny because when I look in the mirror, I've always prided myself of keeping myself tidy, maybe overweight, but always keep myself tidy. And when I now look in the mirror, that 6 months aged me. I mean, my hair has started to turn more gray, like out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And I say to my wife all the time, like, I'm telling you, that radiation, whatever it was, it's aged me. When you look at, I want to come back. When I first met you, you were talking about how the United States is so like ass backwards on how it is that they deal with health and issues. Can you get a little bit into that and like how you said to me, and we'll get back to the stomach, but how it is that it's addressed by the United States and where you think that's wrong?
Well, I use this analogy often, and I think it's an analogy that we could all live by, and that is comparing medicine to the fire department and then chiropractic to, I guess, your contractor or carpenter. Medicine was originally designed for crisis intervention, in my opinion.
Crisis.
Yeah, exactly.
So crisis happens, give them medicine.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Someone has a heart attack, please don't come to me. I can do nothing for you. Go to those guys that are the best at it. And hopefully with their experience and technology, they can save your life. So that's like if your house is burning down, right? We call a fire department, and hopefully they arrive on time with everything that they need to put out the fire. So let's just say they did. However, once they finish putting out the fire, they don't stick around and say, hey, Dennis, I'm really sorry that we only have half your house left based on what we were able to do. But tomorrow I'll be back with my boys to give you a quote on what it's going to take for us as a team to rebuild your house. Why would they not do that? Because they're not good at building houses. They're good at putting out fires. So what do? They go back to the fire department and wait for the next call, I guess, right? And that's what medicine was absolutely great at. The problem is what I believe they've done is decide that they're going to be good at building houses, and they're really not. So for translating crisis and intervention into the treatment of chronic sickness and disease is the reason why, in my opinion, this country outperforms the rest of the industrialized world in sickness and disease. So if we look at it and now say, wait a minute, so I survived the fire, or my house somewhat survived the burning down, right? And who do I need to call? I need to call a contractor or a carpenter to come look and give me a quote on what it's going to take to rebuild it, and then give me ways to prevent house fires in the future. And that's where I see chiropractic fitting in. And if the two could work better together, symbiotically, we could help the productivity of the health profession in this country, or the health productivity of the individual in this country. Again, we consistently rank about 37 out of the 39 industrialized countries in the world in terms of how bad we perform in sickness and disease. Now, this is arguably the richest country on the planet with all the technology that you can imagine, yet we fail in humanity on what's happening from a sickness and disease perspective. This year, we will outperform this past year on cardiovascular disease. We will outperform last year on autoimmune disease, on cancer. We're going to outperform. That's not a good thing.
Outperform meaning that we're going to have worse numbers than we did the last year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those people who have cardiovascular disease dying of cardiovascular events is not because they forgot to take their medication. They're taking it anyway and they're still dying. So there's a real problem here. And I believe the problem comes from the questions. We ask the wrong questions. First of all, we're in a wait and see approach. Do nothing. And then when you have something, come to us. We'll give you something to take, and now you're healthy again. That's a broken model. That's not working. So instead of asking, what do I have? How do I treat it? Those are the two worst questions you can ask on the planet, in my opinion. It needs to be, what have I lost and what I have to regain from a neurological aspect, from a physiological aspect, from a cellular aspect. What does my body genetically need in order to be healthy again? And do that for that individual. And with time and repetition, those people are going to get well. I'm not saying that chiropractic is the treatment of sickness and disease. What I'm saying chiropractic is really good at is asking the right questions and helping people get healthy. We study health. We don't study sickness.
You know, I'll get back to that statement in a second. But with that said, I mean, I want to stick on the medicines thing for a second. When I came to you, I was on omeprazole. In fact, they put me on 80 milligrams, which is just off the charts. I was taking one in the morning and one at night. And then it was supposed to go tapered down to 40. 40 is still high. I mean, if you go to somebody else who's taking it regularly, it's usually anywhere between 10 and 20 milligrams. I'm at 40. And although some of the pains in my stomach were stopping, it really wasn't doing the trick. And I was still getting the dizzies, and I still didn't feel right. I didn't have my strength. It was just, and then what is it? It's more medicine. You know, then I go to the Mayo Clinic, and they're like, oh, no, take this medicine. So now I got omeprazole. I got the other medicine. I don't even know what they gave me. I don't even remember. And it was just like always one pill after the next. And I remember one day waking up with Mary, and she said to me, she goes, you know, I think I'm going to get you one of those pill whatever you call it, the little pockets where you put your pills in for Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. So this way you don't forget whether you take the pill or not. And I looked at that suggestion and I said, whoa, wait a second. How many pills am I tossing down my body? Not to mention I'm still taking my CBD and everything else. I said, this is a mess. And when I spoke to you, you didn't say to me, hey, your doctor's a fool or anything like that. You sort of positioned it like, hey, I'm Colin and I don't take any meds, you know? And so I went back and I'm thinking to myself, maybe I should just cut all of this stuff out. And that was like, as far as I'm concerned, one of the first steps that I took to start feeling better. Then I want to focus now in on, I mean, you said something and just a quick comment on it before I skip it. Is your feeling that these medicines that are given, is it like, hey, take this medicine, but the side effects, isn't that going to cause the need for another medicine and another? I mean, it's like a chain that never ends, right?
Yeah, I think we see that very often because every medication has a side effect, which is what they refer to. I say it's a direct effect. It's going to affect you directly, whether you like it or not. Obviously, medicine, they don't ask the question, in my opinion, when they do the scientific study, does, for example, lowering your cholesterol with this medication equate to greater cellular health? Does it make the organism healthier? It just reduces the number of cholesterol in your blood by more than the placebo. There are studies to suggest that you will live about the same amount of time or less, just die with a lower number. So you have to be cautious in your approach to medicine. Now, let me make this clear. I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't tell people to take medicine or not take it.
Right.
I think we were clear on that in the beginning, and the goal was for you to, as we start to help you get well, speak to your doctor about kind of going off these things if that was your goals. But the point is, yes, side effects happen all the time. And then I kind of joke sometimes, and this is not to have an attack on specialists, but I joke about a specialist being someone who knows more and more about less and less until they know everything about nothing. And the reason I joke about that is because let's say I give you a drug for your heart and it affects your gut. Well, that's not my issue. I'm a heart doctor. So now you need to go to a gut specialist to figure out, how to treat that problem. But I think it's very clear that, drugs don't change function and they don't make your cells healthier. Right. So there is absolutely a place for them, but I think we've got to change our approach. And you talked about that. I spent 12 years practicing chiropractic in Barcelona, and it was a lot easier, to be honest, because people there are living in a social system. So they have all the medication and surgeries in abundance. They can have it, not necessarily at the time frame they would like it, but it's there available to them at no cost. The problem is that what they were looking for, they weren't getting. So when chiropractic started to become, I don't want to say more popular, just there were more chiropractors, ended up living in Spain. And so the people recognized, hey, wait a minute, there is something else that we can do to, number one, get better, and number two, prevent having to use the social system. So there's people, for example, who need a hip replacement surgery that might take 2 years before they can get it done, right? Because there's such a long queue of people waiting for these things. And so people are saying, well, listen, I want to prevent that. I don't want to get there. So how can maybe chiropractic help me with that? And when you explain to them how it works, they tend to understand it and they tend to be very clear on, okay, this is something I want to do. A lot of the times here, I have people that are taking 16 different medications a day, 20, 36. And they tell me, no, doc, I'm healthy. Just get rid of my pain. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, how do you define health? And I'm like, you're taking 16 different medications a day. You cannot be healthy, in my opinion, according to medicine. If there is a diagnosis, then that means you have a condition that needs to be treated with medicine. So therefore, you are obviously sick.
Yes.
So, that doesn't make any sense to me. And unfortunately, I think the perception kind of around what's going on is a real problem.
Yeah.
So
let's go into the idea of medicine, because you said something about the statins, right? So I have high cholesterol. It runs in my family, right? It's generic. It's genetic. My grandmother, I think, died with cholesterol. She was at over 500. It was an insane number. She lived till she was 98 years old. Okay. So with that said, when I was going through my stuff, one of the things that we started to think it was that it was my heart, right? I have I have an athlete heart rate where at nighttime I'm down to the low 40s, high 30s. I mean, anybody else would be like, oh my God, I'm dying. But I have a very slow heart rate. So we started thinking that maybe we went to another guy who said, oh, you need to get a pacemaker. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I want a pacemaker. I'm 53 years old. I want a pacemaker. Long story short, we go to Mayo Clinic, and I walked in there one day and said, my heart is hurting me. I kind of overdid it a little bit just because I knew I'd go to the front of the line. But it would just, things weren't feeling right. All right.
Correct.
And I would not leave that hospital until they gave me every single test. I wanted the Thalamine stress test where they pump the stuff into you and you run the treadmill. And then I also wanted the nitro test where they put the stuff under your tongue and you go into a tube. It's almost like an MRI of your heart. So they said if I had those two tests, there'd be no question about whether my heart was healthy or not. Ashley was in the room. Ryan was in the room. May God strike me down if I'm lying. They come in and they say to me, Mr. Lynch, we looked at both of your tests. Yeah, you have high cholesterol. My cholesterol was like in the high 200s. They said, but you have probably the most healthy heart we've seen here in Mayo Clinic in years. Remember that, Ashley? And I was like, what? And they said, yeah, seriously, because when people come in here and they need these tests, obviously their heart's on the right, because your heart is going to go to like you're 150 years old. It's like, man, over the last couple of weeks, they wanted to put me on statins. They wanted to put a pacemaker in my chest.
Oh my.
Right? And I'm like, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense. And I just saw so many different articles about how it is that, yeah, you know what? They tell you need a statin for the rest of your life. It's a customer for the rest of the life.
Yeah.
You're going to need omeprazole for your stomach for the rest of your life. It's a customer for the rest of their life.
Correct.
And they scare the bejesus out of you to think that if you don't take that medicine, you're going to drop dead on your face. And yet, since I've been rid of all those medicines, I feel much different. Now, with that said, do you have anything else you want to add on about medicines? Because I want to start going to the back.
Yeah, well, let's just talk about cholesterol. I mean, I hear this all the time. A lot of patients come in and they're on a statin. And I say, well, how long do you have to take that for? Some of them will say, well, I don't know. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? I don't know, I guess forever. I said, well, why do you think that? Well, I guess if I stop taking them, it'll go back up. So then I'll say, well, then it's obviously not working, right? And they'll be like, what? What do you mean? So if you're taking something and it's bringing the number down, again, does that equate to the fact that you're healthier? And then if it's actually working, at some point, if the numbers are where your specialist suggests they should be, then if you go off it, then you would think it would remain where it suggested it should be. And it, generally speaking, doesn't. Why? Because you haven't affected the environment to which is causing the cholesterol. You know, cholesterol is super important for every cell function in the body. And I hear this all the time too, is that you know, there's this bad cholesterol. You know, the LDL gets its bad reputation. And I know through a lot of research that the reason for it getting its bad reputation is actually because of inflammation. And apparently when there's inflammation present, then the outer endothelial layer of the artery can raise up and cause an opening for that to go in. And therefore it can cause atherosclerosis and some damage. But the causal factor is not that, it's the inflammatory process, right? And so addressing cause is more important than treating effect. And there's studies out of Sweden that suggest that people living with cholesterol as high as 600, like your, was it your mother or
My grandma.
Your grandmother, are healthier than people who have it artificially reduced through the chemical process or through statins, you know? And then there's also articles now or research suggesting that it's causing other things like, or contributing to things like Alzheimer's, you know? So I don't know if it's all necessarily clear yet. And I'm not trying to, you know, put things out there and suggest that all people should go off statin drugs. But I think it's failing us, right? I don't think it's the answer to cardiovascular events. I think what we have to figure out is, why is your cholesterol elevated, and look to the environment, correct what's going on, and help it, you know, respond better, because it's a physiological response. And in my opinion, to take a chemical to address cholesterol is a bigger stress on the body, because the body is doing everything it can to help you survive your environment. So bringing that number down with a chemical is going against the innate response of the body, and it's actually causing your body more stress than it is helping it. And again, people aren't dying because they failed to take their statins. People are dying anyway, right? And so, sorry, can I just say this?
Yeah, no, keep going.
Going back to those questions where, you know, the people say, well, my doctor said I should take this. And I say, well, how long? And they say, well, forever. And I say, why? And they say, well, it's genetic. And I say, well, how did they establish that? And they say, well, my mom or dad. And they asked the question, did your mom or dad have high cholesterol? And I said, yes, in this case, it was my dad. Okay, it's genetic, take the pill. But they also say the same response if you say, no one in my family had high cholesterol. Okay, take the pill anyway. So I really don't understand that whole concept, right? To me, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And you can't change a genetic condition with a pill. I mean, Down syndrome is Down syndrome. Right. You're not going to change that.
Right.
And I have had 2 kids. They were patients of mine in Barcelona that literally from birth had high cholesterol. So does that mean it's a problem? No, it doesn't mean it's a problem.
Right.
But most people aren't, you're not seeing that. You're seeing cholesterol show up later in life, and cholesterol helps transport stress hormones, you know? Yeah. So we've got to figure out the stress that's going on as to why it's up, not just say, hey, something's up, let's bring it down, and now you're healthier.
Well, I mean, so I was just writing down notes here because there's so much stuff I want to talk to you about. We have plenty of time. When I was sick, one of the things that my doctor had said, because I had, I started to have the risk of going towards Barrett's esophagus. So the bottom of my esophagus, you know, the little sphincter wasn't closing correctly. So all that acid reflux was coming back up, and the esophagus was starting to, I can't remember the way, deteriorate was the word he was using. And then my stomach, I was having ulcers, and there was a deterioration there as well, and a lot of inflammation. So of course he wanted me to do omeprazole. And then on top of that, he said, look, you got to change some of your habits. So I am huge on watching a Netflix at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, sitting down with a scotch, or even if it isn't scotch, sitting down with iced tea, grabbing a couple of pretzels. Hey, what's the big deal? It's pretzels. It's not that bad. Having pretzels. And it's 11 o'clock at night. I just finished my, bag of pretzels and I have my drink. And now I'm going up to bed and I'm laying down, and all of that stuff that hasn't been digested is now looking to make its way up towards my esophagus. So he said, stop the late night eating, stop the late night drinking, and stop eating these bad foods with all the sugar and all the crap and all the preservatives. Start going to apples. And it's like, what? I want pretzels versus apples. He's like, all right, look, maybe put a little peanut butter on it at first, and then wean yourself off the peanut butter. Just start eating a little bit healthier. Then I speak to you and you give me this list of things I should be eating. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not eating anything on this list. And when you're afraid, when you're saying, hey, I'm going to die, or I'm in trouble, or my life isn't the same, and you're looking for answers, I would eat grass if you told me what to do with, if I had to.
Correct.
And then when I started eating things like oatmeal, when I started eating things like fish, the way you were describing the different fish and different vegetables and stuff like that, I'm watching myself, lose more weight than I had already left. The weight I had lost originally was dangerous weight, right? Because I couldn't stop going to the bathroom and all the other different problems. But now I started to go to the bathroom normally and still was losing weight, but feeling like I was losing weight in a good way.
Correct.
And some of those aches and pains were starting to diminish. Not all of them, because you had to do other stuff, which we're going to get to in a second. And since then, I've kept that diet going. I don't eat it late at night. I don't drink late at night. I think some once in a while, you and I hang out on a Saturday around the block or whatever, all right, 11 o'clock, we're having a cocktail. I'll pay for my sins tomorrow. But I don't do it in a string of ways. I don't drink like I was. I don't eat like I was. And I generally, for that, feel better because of that. How important is diet for people, no matter it's about statins, it's just about your gut, it's about anything? How important is diet in our lives?
Well, super important. And I think it was Thomas Edison who said, was it him? Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. And the point is that we have to understand that we are not a trash can. So everything that we put in is to nourish us, to provide us with energy, to help the brain and nervous system and cellular function. So diet is super important. There are 5 pillars that we talk about in chiropractic for us to help people get healthy, and diet is a super important pillar. And again, it's just asking the right questions. What does nature provide us, right? What did God give us that we should be eating? And most people are eating boxed food, right? So most of what people are eating is absolute poison. It looks like food because it's something that goes in your mouth. It has taste. You can digest it, but it's not food. It's absolutely poison, and it should be labeled as poison. It shouldn't be labeled as food, in my opinion, right? And so this is what's unfortunate. The next thing that is a real problem, and I think more so in this country than many, many other countries around the planet, is the introduction of chemical farming that probably occurred in the late 70s, early 80s, right? There was an abundance of these chemicals, and all of a sudden it was a way in which to better farm, if you will. Well, that's led to a very specific chemical that is absolutely, in my opinion, destroying the health of Americans. And this chemical will destroy your gut. It'll destroy your gut microbiome, cause dysbiosis. It'll poke holes into the gut lining, cause things like leaky gut and ulcerative colitis and all sorts of chronic conditions, as well too as, affect the blood-brain barrier and allow for that chemical and other heavy metals to enter into the brain and lead to other major neurological problems.
Is that the weed killer?
Yeah, so that's the active ingredient is in Roundup spray is called glyphosate. I mean, countries like Russia and France have completely banned it. Yet we consistently understand in this country that it does cause cancer, for example. Yet it's in our foods. If you look at people, sometimes I joke about this all the time, but it's also perception. So this lady the other day, her perception of what I had to say with regards to the chemical toxins in her life, she said, well, when I go to the restaurant, I order the salad. I take the healthy choice. And my argument is maybe that's the most toxic choice you can take because of the sprays. I mean, people are in hazmat suits spraying your food with these chemicals to protect themselves, and then you're going to go and eat that and think that it's not going to affect us in a negative way. It's absolutely very clear that it does.
So then, I mean, you know, the scary side of that is that, oh my God, Colin. So if you're telling me I can't go to a restaurant and order salad, I mean, what the hell am I left to do? You know, like there's not. So, I mean, let's change this, and we'll come back to that in a second. Real quick, ready? According to you, if you were to pick out 2 things that you can have for breakfast and it would be okay, what would you pick?
Eggs and avocado.
Okay. Eggs and avocado. All right. So let's say, for instance, that's one. What would be another thing?
What would be another thing for breakfast? Well, I don't think oats is a bad option. You've already chosen that. Oats is a grain. Obviously, if it's genetically modified and sprayed, there's going to be, you know, some side effects of that, I think. You know, we bioaccumulate the introductions of toxins in the body with time and repetition, and eventually we'll see effects and negative ones.
Was there a certain kind of oatmeal that you get? I mean, so is there a certain, I know like with, and I think you said with fish, right? You said fish, but you're like, wait, it's got to be a certain fish.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so first of all, it needs to not be farm raised, because when you farm raise anything, you're not giving them their natural genetic food supply, right? So for me, it needs to be wild caught fish, first and foremost. Yeah. And then you've got to be eating fish that are less toxic. So things like salmon, wild caught salmon, you know, and then I tell people all the time, you've got to be eating things like sardines and anchovies and mackerel, these type of fish. And no one wants to hear me out on that. They don't like the taste here in North America, unfortunately, you know, but that's in, you know, the Mediterranean diet. It's something that they eat all the time. You know, every other day, if you will, or even every day.
What kind of other stuff? I mean, lunchtime. What should people be eating for lunch?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. To me, lunch should be the main meal of the day, right? And I think you should have a good, healthy protein. Again, you know, red meat is getting a bad reputation right now. It's amazing to me, but red meat, specifically speaking, beef. If you eat beef from a cow that eats grass and finishes its food with grass, you're eating a very healthy meat. Those cows, when you look at them, on average, those cows are going to be slaughtered at about 2 years of age. But if you left them to live, they will live to about 20 years of age. What they say about industrialized raised cows, obviously there's all sorts of chemicals and hormones used for those cows. They feed them grains, not a genetic requirement for their diet. So they do that on purpose to make them fat, right? To make them grow faster. But now we're talking about chronically obese, sick animals that we're going to be eating the meat from. So we're eating sick meat, and that meat is very acidic. Both meats are acidic, right? But you know, cows that eat grass are rich in omega-3 oils. However, the acidity we have to balance out with. So I always suggest a huge plate of vegetables, whether it be a huge plate of salad or a huge plate of vegetables. We must balance that acidity out with the alkalinity of a good vegetable.
Well, with the salad, I mean, so you just warned about salad in a restaurant. So
Correct.
What kind of salad am I allowed to eat?
Yeah, so obviously, in my opinion, everything that we should be eating should be organic. And to me, originally, organic was the norm. Now it amazes me that, you know, these chemical companies, why don't they want to label? Why do they actively push to not label their foods? I mean, let's just use Nike as an example. They want that swish on every item that they have because they're so proud of it. So if chemical farming was good for you, then why wouldn't we be proud of labeling that? Why would you have to label and spend so much money in order to become an organic farmer? It doesn't make sense to me. That should be less expensive, and that should, you know what I mean? And so, yeah, you need to be eating organic. I don't think we have an option anymore, even though we can argue that these chemicals are going to be evaporated into the atmosphere and come down on the rain onto those farms anyway, and you're going to have some type of let's just say influence from that chemical. I mean, I think they've established that 80% of Americans that they've studied, they've found glyphosate in their blood. They've found in the breast milk of Inuits, you know, the Eskimos in northern Canada, glyphosate's even been exposed to those people. It's a real problem.
So what about, so in terms of, so let me, I'll spray out some foods and drinks, and if you hear something bad, stop me.
Okay.
Right? Apples.
So organic, must be organic, must be organic.
Okay, let's assume for the moment everything's organic.
Okay.
All right.
So apple has one apple is one thing, right?
Right.
Like that, compare that to like a thing that you get in a package, and look how many ingredients are inside that package. So you're way better off eating the apple versus eating, or let's just compare that to a donut, right? So I do this all the time. I do talks at schools, right? And so we talk to the kids, and we oftentimes, if we're allowed to, we'll take some apples and bananas and the healthy stuff, right? And then we'll also take the donuts. And so we'll ask the question, hey kids, what's more healthy for you, the apple or the donut? And 9 out of the 10 kids will say the apple, and the one clown in the class on purpose will say the donut, of course, but just jokingly, they know, kids innately know what's healthier for them. So we'll continue on with the talk, and at the end we'll say, hey guys, help yourself to what's on the table. Now, the problem is that most of what isn't left is the donut, and all the healthy stuff is left over. And I think there's a philosophy around this. Most people have this idea that if they eat the donut, well, it might pack a few calories. Who cares? The point that I'm trying to make here is that the expense to your health of eating all that junk sugar, that processed sugar and the junk from the donut, and the devastating effects that it truly has on your health is super important. But more important is not making the right choice because of the benefits of eating the banana or the apple, right? It's so much healthier, right? And so this is the problem. So yeah, sorry.
So if the apple is organic, it's good to go.
Yeah, I would say it is. Now, of course, probably has a higher sugar content than other fruits. So obviously, if sugar is an issue to people, they have to really limit the amount of fruits that they're eating. I would argue that, the berries are better. But again, strawberries are highly sprayed, so you have to be very careful.
Okay. What about things like ribs?
Ribs. Oh, are we talking about beef or pork?
Either one.
So
with a lot of good gravy on it and stuff like, the sauce. And I mean, is stuff like that, is that literally killing people?
You know what? I think it potentially is. Again, we have to establish how was that, cow or pig raised, what's inside the bottle of, or like whoever created the paste, the barbecue sauce, right? What's actually inside that bottle? What's in abundance is, things made from corn. Corn is the most genetically modified crop, corn and soy in this country. They spray them like crazy, and they're not healthy for us. And grain's not good for you. We're not necessarily designed to eat grains. They're inflammatory. They provoke, gastrointestinal issues. It's not something necessary. So high fructose corn syrup is most likely going to be inside that. What's going to be inside that then? Glyphosate.
Colin, you realize that this stuff is in everything.
In
right?
everything.
I mean, it's almost like talking to you on this stuff. This is the one part of where I've always walked away being like, oh, this is just too hard. Yeah. Because I mean, look at you're in perfect shape, right? In terms of like, there's not an ounce of fat on you. So obviously you're eating right, and it's not making you miserable. You're a happy-go-lucky guy. Every time I see you, you're smiling, giving me hugs, this and that. So is it just a function of a lifestyle change? Once you change that lifestyle, it becomes a lot easier. It's hard at the first. It's like exercise, right? That first week is the worst week, and then after that, you can't stop.
Correct. But what's super important, though, is creating a habit. But around creating a habit, we have to change our philosophy, right? We've got to go from a wait-and-see approach until something's wrong. You see, it's much more expensive to treat sickness and chronic disease than it is in prevention. And a lot of people don't see that. Now, even if your insurance is so good that it covers the cost of your disease, there's other costs to that disease, right? If someone has a really bad disease, unfortunately, it's going to affect them from an emotional perspective. It's going to affect the people around them. It's going to affect their ability to perhaps work and bring in money to take care of the family. It affects you in ways that you can't imagine. The expense of that is devastating. So you have no choice. You have to make healthy choices, and you've got to make it around the philosophy. People all the time who go on diets. Diet is what you eat. Diet is what you eat. And if you eat what you're genetically supposed to eat, and we can argue that the North American species, which is, I guess you, Dennis, meat is okay. Like, we're supposed to eat meat and vegetables. I don't believe we're rabbits. I don't think we're only supposed to eat vegetables. But if people make that choice, that's their choice. As long as they're doing everything they can to not necessarily eat a whole bunch of other things that are not congruent with health in their vegetable intake. A lot of these people I see eat too much grains and pastas, you know? So again, you've got to ask the right questions, and we don't have a choice. Look at Steve Jobs. You know, the man was a genius. He was good to the world, like in terms of what he brought in technology, but I think he died at 55, way too young. There's so much more he could have done. And it doesn't matter how wealthy you are. Once you lose your health, forget about it. It's
forget
over,
it. Forget
so
it.
we have no choice but to figure out your philosophy. And when your philosophy changes and you start to add the habits with time and repetition, you will get better for sure. There's other components that I know we're going to talk about, but if you start with that, absolutely. So I consult with people all over the world. I'm consulting with this young girl out of South Africa who her medicine started causing her to have seizures, right? So we have to look at, obviously, how can we help this individual? But once we start to help this individual, making some changes into their lifestyle, because let's be honest, and I think I'm putting out a very low number here. 75% of all chronic disease that kills us in Western society is 100% preventable, and it's from what I call suicide by lifestyle choice. Right?
Suicide by lifestyle choice.
Lifestyle choice.
Yeah.
Yes, we are literally killing ourselves, and we don't even realize it through our lifestyle habits. You know,
I want to also point out too that you are cognizant and you recognize that life is life. And I have been with you more than once where both of us have had more than 2 beers. I mean,
Correct.
You'll be the first guy to say, hey, we can put down the armor for this one day. We can put down the armor for this one time. So when you do break habit, right? What kind of stuff do you do? So let me change it because I'm making it too difficult. I'll ask you questions. If we have a party on a Saturday night and there is only the sort of food that you would not usually touch and there's beer, will you grab those foods and that beer for that particular one night?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like you say, we're here to live and enjoy life. And so as long as I'm not doing that, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it's going to be okay. The question is, what do we do after that? What do we do for the rest of the time during that week? And, our habits when we wake up, determine our day, our perception, our environment, basically controls our biology, right? So when we start to think about, okay, so I had a good time. If I start to harp on the fact that I drank too much or maybe didn't eat the right things that are extremely toxic to my body, if I start to drive my brain to think in those negative thoughts, you see nerves that fire together, wire together, and where your thoughts go, your energy flows. So if I drive my energy into that, all I'm doing is wiring my brain into believing that I'm going to be sick as a result of those decisions, right? So the point is, I understand that I'm allowed to, I almost live by an 80-20 rule. So 80% of the time I'm doing everything I can to eat at home, eat the right foods that I believe that are genetically congruent with health for, let's say, my species. And I think my species, being the South African that I am, is very similar to the North American species. So I feel like if I'm doing all those right things, 80% of the time, that 20% effect is going to be completely outweighed by the 80.
You've said to me before, and if I have this wrong, correct it. So you have 2 kids, and then of course there's you and your wife. Everybody is healthy looking. I mean, nobody's got an inch of fat on them. Your sons play ball. You guys have never been to doctors before?
Well, so obviously my wife and I definitely have.
Right.
My parents, when I was growing up, definitely took us to the doctor every now and then. We didn't go there because of anything else that maybe they thought we needed a check or we weren't well. So we went, From the moment that my wife and I have been under the chiropractic, let's just say from the moment I went to chiropractic university, I haven't taken a medication in at least 30 years, maybe.
Really?
Well, that's pre-chiropractic. It's been a long time. I haven't taken a medication except for one time I fell off a motorbike and I separated my AC joint, and I promise you the pain was devastating. I said, give me what you can,
Yeah.
But outside of that, we've had no medication. My wife did have some health issues, and that's another discussion.
Another podcast.
Yeah. But my kids were born, one was born in a hospital, one was born at home. Neither of them have had any chemical into their system. They've only eaten healthy foods. They've had chiropractic care from the moment of birth. Literally within the first 30 minutes of them coming into the world, they got chiropractic care. And we've always tried to feed them the correct diets. And again, they've both been to a medical doctor once, and this was in Spain. One was because we thought he broke his nose, and I didn't have a way to. I didn't have an X-ray facility in my center, and it wasn't allowed for chiropractors in Spain. So we took him to a local urgency care center, and we took an X-ray. The other we thought broke his arm. And these medical doctors were absolutely amazed. They kept asking different questions, and the answer was always no, and they couldn't understand it. So they were like, "Okay, fine, let's have a look." Because initially when we went to the pediatrician for the nose, the lady wanted to ask questions about his history, like she should be, and then do an evaluation and then the X-ray. And she just couldn't understand that these kids, number one, healthy, never seen a doctor. Never taken any medications. How is that possible?
Right.
Well, it's because we're genetically designed to be healthy, right?
Yeah.
I just think the questions are asked right from the beginning that are incorrect.
I want to go into, so there's two things left that I know that we have to grab. And if I've missed something, please you jump in there. But I want to talk about the spine and the chiropractic side of that, and also positive thinking.
Okay.
And I want to say something. I mean, you're the first one who told me when we were talking about the fact that your kids had never been to the doctor and things like that. They've been sick before. I mean, they've gotten a cold or a flu, whatever it may be.
Oh, yeah.
And you just use natural remedy and chiropractic medicine to get them back on the mend.
Absolutely. I mean, the number one approach with us for our health, we can say on a weekly basis, is chiropractic, right? I call it brain-body disconnect syndrome. Right, the brain, like we have to be very clear on this. This is what we're very clear on in chiropractic, and if you're not, I don't think you're doing chiropractic a service. The brain is the master control system, or the brain and the nerve system is the master control system of the body. Everything that we do thanks to the brain and nerve system. The fact that we can have this conversation, that we can see each other, that we can digest our food, is happening, automatically, thanks to the brain and nerve system. So if there's any interference to the brain's ability to properly communicate with an organ, with a cell, with a tissue, with a finger, or with an entire system in the body, then eventually with time, that system is going to be negatively affected and go to what we refer to as a state of dis-ease, meaning lack of ease in the body, meaning lack of function. And we got to figure out how to restore that function again. It's not treating that potential condition. It's figuring out where the disconnect is and why the brain is not able to properly communicate and help that the function of that area of the body, right?
Okay.
And so this is the most important factor here. This is what we do as a family. This is our go-to for our health, right? And then we look at the other pillars. But let's continue on with this brain-body disconnect syndrome. In chiropractic, we call it subluxation. A subluxation, in simple layman's terms, there is many more complicated definitions, but it's basically when you have a vertebra that's stuck, it's not moving correctly, it's rotated out of its proper juxtaposition with the one above, one below, and it's going to always affect our body on 4 different levels. It's always going to affect the outermost level. The muscle tone around there or in different areas are going to be affected. The ligaments, tendons, and the joints are going to be affected. So when it affects the muscle, you're going to probably have discomfort eventually, not necessarily immediately. Joints, you're going to eventually have pain. Immediately, no. Joints, when you have pain's generally speaking the last thing to show and the first thing to go, right? And so oftentimes we think, oh, okay, well, the pain's gone, I must be healthy. No, your body's in a physiologically adaptive state. It couldn't heal it, so now it's going into an adaptive process, which means what it's trying to do is protect you. It's trying to put you into places that you otherwise not necessarily should be in, but it's doing that to bide you time to go get help. But because we grow up in a system, an allopathic model that says when you have no symptom, you're healthy, which is broken, it needs to be fixed, right. We don't do anything about it. Until eventually we get to what we call symptomatic pathology, and then again we ask the wrong questions. So it's going to affect the joints, and then it's going to affect the nerves, and how the transmission of the messages along those nerves are being transmitted. And again, it could happen both ways, afferent and efferent, meaning it could happen from brain to body or body to brain. And we've talked about vagus nerve activation. Very early on when I was studying, it was in my neurology class, and we were talking about the vagus nerve. I knew very, very early on the importance of the vagus nerve just because of its innovation to literally every organ in the body.
I just wanted to give people what the vagus nerve is because not everybody knows that. So the vagus nerve goes from the head down to the torso, correct?
Yeah, well, it literally goes to every organ in your body, right?
Right.
And most of the communication along the vagus nerve is actually from organ to brain. Right. Okay. There's some parasympathetic. It's actually 80% is from organs to brain, and then about 15% is from brain parasympathetically to organ. So oftentimes that anxiety that you're feeling in the brain is actually gut issue, right? This is
gut, meaning the stomach issue. There's something. So if you're feeling anxiety, that's being driven by something going on in the stomach.
Gut. Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely. And then there's some motor innervation to the muscles in the larynx and pharynx, which is very interesting. I gave some vagus nerve activation to a gentleman who was having issues with snoring, and apparently his snoring has been resolved. Now, again, does that mean everyone should do that for snoring? No. And I think this is where, in the scientific community, chiropractic will fail in a randomized controlled clinical trial because they're reducing us to, if you say that the T5 or T6 subluxation is the cause of stomach issues, chiropractors are going to fail. Why? Because when you study 100 people, it might be the case in 2 or 3, right? And so those 2 or 3 people were a success, but in the other 97, nothing happened. Why? Because it's not that specific, right? It's not, I'm reducing the symptom in the stomach by only adjusting that. This is an entire ecosystem. I might adjust your first vertebrae in your neck, which is closely related to the brainstem and how the brainstem regulates your gastrointestinal system, and maybe have a result. There's so many different reasons why chiropractic can potentially help gut issues.
Is that why somebody has to continue to go to the chiropractor and always get adjusted and keep on going? You have to continue to keep on going. Is that why that's like that?
Well, again, that's a choice. Like, to keep going to a chiropractor is obviously a choice. But let me just put it into perspective. If I injure my elbow, right? And I can't move it, I've got some inflammation, which is the body's innate response to heal what's going on here. I've got pain because that's one of the responses to inflammation, and lack of range of motion. And so I go to the medical doctor. The medical doctor says, okay, we figured out what's wrong. In the meantime, I want to give you some pain medications, maybe some anti-inflammatories. And then I want you to go see a therapist to work on therapy to help your arm. So let's just say I'm doing all of this. Now, keep in mind that those medicines perhaps are blocking the pain signals to the brain, so the brain experiences less pain. It's not curing anything, right?
Right.
And while I'm doing this, I'm getting more motion, and greater motion will also help with the pain signals to the brain. But let's just say now I got about this much range of motion. I don't have full range of motion back. I've got about this much range of motion in my elbow, and I don't have any pain. I don't have any inflammation. Should I stop seeing the physical therapist? It wouldn't make any sense, right? Mm-hmm. I have to continue on until I get full range of motion back and complete health back into this, because if I don't, it's going to die. Right. Now, that's the same with chiropractic. So first and foremost, what we have to do is remove the interferences so the body can start to heal itself. Excuse me. Then we have to look at the imbalances. Like, what we see now more than ever in the history of humanity is what we call anterior head carriage, or tech neck. That's the common word. So everyone's head is displaced forward. Their ears, instead of being over their shoulders, is displaced forward. And the effects of that are devastating on our physiology. But just that anterior head could increase the weight of the head into your spinal structure by a ridiculous amount. Let's just say 40 kilos, right? 40 kilograms, sorry, I'm in kilograms, so whatever that equates to in pounds, right? Now, that's a stress. That's going to fire up muscles, even in your low back, to respond to holding your body upright against gravity. You may not have any symptoms, right? No symptoms at this point. By the time the symptoms show up, that imbalance and displacement of spinal structures is going to cause wear and tear quicker to happen into the spinal system than it should, right? Mm-hmm. And we can argue that we're designed to live 120 years without any degeneration. And what I see all the time is some of my older patients go and the medical doctor will finally do an x-ray. Now remember, this is generally speaking later on, because again, it takes a long time to show for the pain to show up. And oftentimes it's the first thing to go. So sometimes that evaluation is not even done. But anyway, let's say you're 40, 50, 60 years old and we see some degeneration in certain segments of the spine. Oftentimes they blame age. And I'll say, but hold on, every bone in your spine is the same age. If they all don't have the same degeneration, why are we blaming age? But you see, again, it's easy to do that. And we're convinced that there's nothing we can do. So it is what it is. Take the pill, right?
So I want to use myself as a second here because we're kind of mixing brain and spine, right? So I want to,
Yes.
Okay. So I'm coming to you. I'm having all these problems with my stomach. The pains are all over the place. I have them in my intestines. I have them on my sides. I mean, I'm calling you up in the middle of the day, being like, Colin, it's happening again. It's happening again. So you sort of always calm me down a little bit. And then when I come into you, you're making different adjustments in my back. You're doing the stuff with my neck. You're hitting different nerve spots and all this other different jazz. And eventually what was started to happen for me is all my pains started to go away. It was little by little. And you'd ask me, how are you feeling? How are we feeling? I'm feeling a little better, feeling a little better. Then I'd have a little something go worse. You'd be like, okay. And you adjust something different. And then about 2 weeks ago, I came into you and I said, Colin, I'm telling you, there's something wrong with my intestines again. It's back. And I was saying to Mary, I said, Mary, I'm having the pains on the side of my intestines. This is where it all started. That was the first pain I ever had back in July when it all started. And she's like, oh God. I'm like, damn it. I was about to take the omeprazole again. I said, all right, let me go into him. And I went in and I said that to you. And you said, you looked at me and you said, it's not your intestines. In fact, I said to Mary, I said, damn it, I'm going to have to get another colonoscopy. I'm telling you, I got something going on with my colon. And she said to me, Dennis, you've had 2 colonoscopies in 2 years consecutive, clean as a whistle. You're not having colon cancer, okay?
Correct.
But when the pain is so bad, I go into you, you tell me, I'm telling you right now, it's not that. I know what it is. And then you worked somewhere on my lower back, you did something, and then I left you, and then within no time at all, the pain is gone and it hasn't come back.
Correct.
Is that what you're explaining in the sense that if you got a gut issue and things aren't aligning with the spine and the nerves aren't shooting the right way, that the reaction to that is going to be pain? It's going to throw pain at my stomach, but it's really something in my back.
Correct. I would say a lot of the time, not every time, that is the case. And just going back to your question about, do we have to see a chiropractor consistently over time and forever? And my usual response is, well, you said to me you're taking that medication forever, right? You have no problem doing that. And I'm not referring to you, Dennis, right. But many of my patients say that. I was like, so why do you have such a problem with doing something that actually has value? Meaning I'm through chiropractic helping your spine be healthy, your nerve system, how your brain responds to your environment. Everything that I'm doing is helping you healthy. Why would you not want to do that for the rest of your life? Just like drink good, healthy, clean, fresh water. It's a requirement, right? So healing goes in waves. I refer to it as you're going to go up and you're going to come down, and you're going to go up and you're going to come down. It's impossible. I'm not God. I joke about this all the time. If I was God, I'd touch you once, you'd be healed, right? But I'm not. So I have to see you 3 times a day for the rest of your life. Again, that's a joke. So the point is, as we're going up, the body's going through some physical, chemical, and emotional toxins or traumas that you can't avoid. And it's taking your body out of balance. And what we have to do is continue to provide the input into the nerve system to allow it to continue to do what it's designed to do. If we honestly think that when a chiropractor adjusts you, let's just say I've adjusted you 20 times or 2 times, and now your pain is gone. If we honestly think that the problem hasn't been has been resolved as well, I think we might be a little confused, right? It takes time. Just like if you want to go to the gym and get big muscles, if you go for a week, you're probably going to feel bad. Number one, right? If you've never done it, right. But you go for a week and you look in the mirror and you say, "This doesn't work. I'm not going to do this anymore. It doesn't work." That happens oftentimes in chiropractic, and that's because you take a pill, you switch off the signal to the brain, and now you experience less of whatever that symptom is, right? Chiropractic doesn't work this way. We're doing natural things to create balance back into the spinal and nerve system so it can properly communicate and then give that organ, let's just say, or that system, the potential to heal and function properly again. That doesn't mean chiropractic's the cure for everything, but I tell you what, we do a pretty good job.
Yeah, I was just, you were talking before about the weight of the head, and we got about another 10 minutes here.
Okay.
So I remember when I went into you, you took a picture of me forward, and then you took a picture of me sideward. And then you showed me how it was that my head was actually tilting forward and that I was putting strain. And because look, we're all there, right? We got our cell phone, we're looking down.
Correct.
Right? We're on our laptop, we're looking down. Right? Everything's like that. We're on a keyboard, we're looking down. So you said that to me and I was like, holy cow. And it's not until I saw it that it made me feel like, oh man, I got to change something like this.
Yeah.
So most people are probably, nowadays, especially because of these damn things, are probably suffering from that. And it's probably causing some kind of problem somewhere in their life. No?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So let me go through something else that I want to get to because it's so damn important as far as I'm concerned. So you do this thing, you're doing my back and my stomach's starting to feel great. I haven't had to be on any more medicines. I still take my CBD. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I eat as right as I possibly can. Not perfect by any shade. The other problem I was experiencing was incredible dizzy. Mm-hmm. And the doctors had told me, well, it's your stomach doing this and this and this and this and this and all this different stuff. And I still said, let me go check my teeth. I had my teeth checked. I went to an ENT. He literally had me for 30 seconds in his office. He took the thing in my ear. He said, no, it's not your ears. And I was left. I remember actually how pissed off I was. I mean, I've never left bad reviews for anybody online. That guy got a bad review. I said, this has got to be the most ridiculous thing I've ever done. $200 later, right? So I went through all this different stuff and I'm still having the dizzy. I come into you and you're like, all right, let's check out your sinuses. And you start pressing different parts of my head and all my sinuses. And then you start taking my ears and you said to me, he's like, Dennis, don't hit me. because there's bad Dennis. Yeah. And you said, don't hit me. And you start pulling my ears and I'm hearing them pop. And then all of a sudden my dizzy over the course of time is stopping. I mean, to think about how much, and my wife, she's guilty. She kept on saying, taking Allegra. I said, I don't want to take that crap. I told you I'm not taking stuff anymore. How much of the things that people are dealing with all the time do you believe is the ears and the sinuses and all that stuff communicating and having problems doing their thing with the brain or whatever else? I mean, give me the 5 minutes on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have to think about the vestibular system. The vestibular system, which is inside your ears, right? Has an important role in how the brain is perceiving, or keeping your head upright and perceiving the environment and against gravity, right? So when there's imbalances there, I think it can be, and this is not, I don't think, backed up by science, what I'm about to tell you, but I think positioning of the, let's just say the bones in your ear could lead to, some pooling of liquid, which causes bacteria and viruses to kind of, set in and be stuck, if you will, which is also going to affect the sinuses. And very early on in my career, and again, I wouldn't call this chiropractic, and I think that if there's any chiropractors that are like myself, they're probably thinking, oh my gosh, this guy's doing things that isn't chiropractic. But the point is that I'm always looking to see if I can reestablish normal function. And so early on in my career, a chiropractor knew that my postdoctorate studies were in pediatric chiropractics. And it wasn't because I wanted to be a pediatric chiropractor. I wanted to be the best doctor to my own kids. So I wanted more information, right? But the point is, he said, listen, a lot of the times if otitis media, if you're finding that kids are, it's consistently happening and it's not resolving through upper cervical chiropractic care, then pull on the ear and you actually hear a sound that does happen, and oftentimes that just balances things out. Draining can occur and these kids get better, and I found that to be the case. So then I figured, well, hold on, I must be affecting the vestibular system somehow when I do that.
What is the vestibular system?
Well, you got these semiconductors in the ear, right? It's I like in the few minutes time to explain to you the entire thing, but it plays a major role in balance. Okay, let's just put it that way.
Balance system. Okay.
Yeah. So
right.
when that's not, if you will, when the area of the system, like these things called the macula, when they are, in my opinion, let's just say not functioning correctly, they're going to definitely affect balance, and you're going to feel that through the sensory part of the nerve system. This is an opinion, okay?
Okay.
And so when I adjust that, and what I believe I'm doing is creating better balance for those things to better respond, and how we're responding to the environment or seeing the environment through the sensory system, we see things like that getting better. And as in your case, and I've seen it in many cases, people with vertigo, they come into the office and perhaps I'm not supposed to be doing it, but we're doing it. And these people swear that, like they were falling over, and now like they feel like they've fallen
Colin,
over.
I was falling over.
Yeah.
I mean, Ashley, Ryan would walk with me, and I was like, I'm so freaking dizzy. And I could literally not put myself on a straight. If a cop pulled me over and said, get out of the car, and made me do a drunk walk, even though I didn't have a single cocktail for 3 months, he would think that I was drunk simply because I couldn't get myself on the straight. Yeah. And then I come into you and you start doing that, and that stuff just went away. Now, periodically it comes back.
Correct.
It comes back.
Yeah.
In fact, right now, even while I'm sitting here talking to you, I have it a little bit.
Okay.
Like, I could feel it, that I'm not completely straight in. It's a little bit, but it's not to the point of where I can't operate, and so by the time you leave here, I'm going to be pulling my ears.
Okay, no problem.
Because I am playing golf this afternoon. So can't be dizzy.
No,
Gotta
definitely
hit
not.
straight.
Yeah.
So not only that, I mean, Ashley, the same thing. I mean, Ashley has had the worst sinuses, the worst reactions. I mean, there's sometimes she can't even talk because everything, and she starts coming into you and you're starting to do this stuff, and she's not right away, but slowly we've been starting to see the betterment happen within her.
Right.
Wife, the same thing. I mean, I only have one kid yet. No, 2 kids, my 14-year-old and Ryan keeps on asking me, when do I get to go to Dr. Colin? When's my turn? I mean, you just saw Dennis yesterday. So each one of us is going into you, and each one of us is starting to see things get better based on what it is that we were having problems with. I went into you yesterday. I was like, I can't move my neck. You did whatever you did to my neck, and now I can move my neck again. It's like, I don't want to say it's magical, but there is a sense of, I'm feeling something happening for the better, versus when I go to the doctor and they're just sticking me with a damn a pill in my mouth. And I think that's so important to stick. Last part here that I want to bring up is the positive thinking. So I can't remember the story, how you did it. I want you to tell me the story. You told me the story about how the brain works. Hey, listen, you hit your leg on the table, and and you got a wound. If you keep on hitting your leg, you keep on doing stupid things, it's not going to recover. If you sit back and you let things happen, it will start to recover. And then you told me that. I want you to get into that a little bit. And then you also, and we go a little over time here, and then you said to me, listen, you got to start thinking that you're going to be healthy. Get yourself into health. Because I was saying to myself, all right, man, I got to start making my will. I got to start figuring out how I'm going to do my work. I can't do my work anymore. I got to start thinking and living differently. I got to put my brain into this. And you're like, ooh, no, you need to put your brain into, I'm going to fix these problems. So it's your platform now. How important is the positive thinking, and how does that positive thinking work? And what were you referring to when you're talking about how if you keep on hitting your leg into the coffee table, it's never going to repair itself? How does that all work into together?
Well, okay, first of all, there's a thing called signal transduction science, which talks about the fate and the behavior of the organism is directly related to the organism's perception of its environment, right? So I think it's super important that, again, going back to what I said to you earlier, nerves that fire together, wire together, where your thoughts go, your energy flows, right? So literally speaking, the placebo effect is so vital to the success or failure of the organism. Why? Because it can be 0 to 100% effective, just how much you believe in the process or your body healing. You can be extremely healthy. And then there's the nocebo effect, which actually works in the opposite direction. It probably can be 0 to 100% effective, just how much you believe you're going to be sick, right? So it's driving your intention into this belief and understanding that you can heal yourself. I mean, there was a study done that was, and it was very quickly taken off the Discovery Channel, but a surgeon wanted to figure out, does the placebo surgery, what would it be if we did a placebo surgery on these like an arthroscopic surgery on the knee? If we did that, arthroscopy versus the placebo, what would happen? The results were absolutely incredible. What they found was, and it was what they found at the end of the study was, it was the entire process, the belief in, number one, the doctor and his ability to do his art and help people, get well, to the initial consultation, to the day of the procedure, to wheeling that person in and doing all the blood pressure testing and everything, meeting with an anesthesiologist, et cetera, et cetera. The only thing that they did on the surgery was poke 2 holes, right, into the person's knee, and then at the end, stitch them up. Everything else that they were seeing on the screen was someone else's surgery. So again, they thought they had the surgery done. They didn't realize that they were the placebo. And when they followed up on these people 3 years later, like people that barely could walk were playing basketball, right?
Really?
And when they were told that they had the placebo, they're like, we don't care. Look at me. I'm absolutely functioning like I haven't functioned. I can play with my grandkids. This is absolutely amazing. Why it was taken off the Discovery Channel very quickly, I'm not sure. But this is the point. Going back to that, it's partly belief. And sometimes people say to me, Doc, I didn't tell you. I had gut issues when I started with you. I didn't tell you that. All of a sudden, these things are getting better. Could it be chiropractic or is it the placebo? I said, well, first of all, I don't care. If it's the placebo, let's run with it, because the placebo is extremely effective, right? And medicine only has to outperform it by a certain percentage, let's say, and the FDA will approve the drug, right? Because it means it works. So this is the thing. The other thing is going back to, bumping the knee, right? The point that I'm trying to make here is that when you decide to do something consistently over time with the right intention, the right focus, the outcomes are always going to be positive. If you do the opposite, right, you consistently, do the same things over and over again that are going to negatively affect your body, your body's not going to heal, right? And most people are operating on the belief that their genetic makeup is propelling their lives. I mean, these beliefs are very self-limiting, they're self-destructive, and they're false. They're not true. It's a small percentage, a very small percentage of these conditions that are literally, killing society that we can maybe blame on genes. And I would even argue that the reason why I say maybe is because we can still affect the gene positively. So if you do a genetic study and you figure out that you have a predisposition to whatever condition, I would argue that the more important thing is studying the epigenome, which is what will switch on that gene and make you express the condition, right? Or leave it switched off. And that needs to be, talked about in the study of epigenetics. I think, and my opinion, Dr. Bruce Lipton is the man to talk to on that. This guy is absolutely phenomenal. But basically, epigenetics is the science that suggests that environmental signals select, modulate, and regulate gene activity, right? So it's your environment and your life experiences that are regulating gene function. It's not what your destiny is because of genes. We are not sick because of bad luck and bad genes. We're sick because of bad choices, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think, I hope that answers the question, because I put a lot in there.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me personally, I know I've always been a positive thinker, although I am stuck in a negative environment, because what I do every single day is negative, negative, negative. Correct. Joe Biden sucks. The State of the Union was bad. The border is open. People are dying of fentanyl. I mean, it is constantly bad, 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 bad. Yeah. So when I walk away from that, I try to make it all positive. I try to make it as positive as possible. When you get sick and you're not seeing yourself get better, it is very easy to wind up allowing your brain to go into that sense of depression and to be like, this is where I'm going to be. And when I was getting into that with you, when you first came to sat on my sofa, I was at that point of saying, all right, this is the last chance. And then after that, screw it. I know my time's up. So you start getting to that. I'm not giving my brain the power it needs. I'm training my brain to say everything's sick.
Absolutely.
Everything's sick, it's going to stay sick, and that's what you're going to do. And
Correct.
you were saying to me, you got to think positive. You got to think positive. You got to think. Even when I was on vacation in Tennessee, I was having some pains, and you're like, don't think about that. And I'm like, what do you think's wrong? And you wouldn't answer me the question. And I think it was because you knew that I was going to let myself start going onto the internet. Dr.
Correct.
Google is going to tell me my spleen has got bad. I've got cancer of this. I got cancer of that. I mean, that's probably one of the worst things in the world. Do Dr. Google?
Oh,
right?
absolutely, absolutely, and even the medical doctors know that. They say that all the time. At the end of the day, all these negative events, what's going on in the world, everything that you see on the news, I believe has been purposely created to drive right brain function, meaning the more we stimulate the right hemisphere of the brain, it means the more we're going to think about that, we're going to worry about it, and we're going to want to talk about it over and over and over. There's more sympathetic nerve connections to the right side of the brain, which means we might be firing up the sympathetic nerve system chronically, which means we're going to take blood from the gut and ship it off to the extremities because we've got to go into the fight or flight response. This is chronic stress, and I would argue that people are in this mode 24/7. They're not enough in the time of the parasympathetic nerve system to figure out how to heal the wounds of the lion in South Africa that just tried to kill me, right?
Right.
So we're in chronic negative overdrive and driving up that area of the brain. And so, of course, the anxiety centers are going to be initiated because you've got to figure out where this line is. So how are you going to sleep? What's it going to do for your sleep? Yeah. Also, when, there's this hormone called serotonin, right? Most of it's manufactured in the gut, we understand. But when you have chronic anxiety, serotonin is a feel-good hormone, right? It's trying to help you kind of relax and calm down. When there's too much anxiety, it can't keep up with the demand. So your body stops manufacturing it, right? So all of a sudden, when we start to get depressed and then we measure the levels of serotonin, instead of looking to the environment and figuring out what's causing the body to not make it, we just say, oh, your body just doesn't make it. And then let's give you this drug to fix your depression. No, we have to look to the environment always. We have to look to what is the cause of the problems. And when we figure that out, we can work with people. And that's why, sorry to plug this in, but that's why I do consult with people long distance, because I know that I can help them. I think chiropractic is the most important. I try to get every one of those people that I help from a distance under chiropractic care, because I think it's the number one component in the 5 pillars of health.
So I mean, because I know what I'm going to get. People are going to ask me, how do I get to this guy? So you I live
Absolutely.
by you, so I come and see you, but you help people over the internet and things of that nature?
Correct, absolutely.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. Obviously, there's a certain amount of those people that I can take on,
yes,
because of my time that I spend in taking people on in the office,
right,
which is the most important. But yes, absolutely, there's people who have, call me from Spain because of having been there for 12 years. There's, like I say, we're working with this young girl in South Africa who I'm so deeply saddened for what's happened to her. But yes, absolutely, we do that, but we do that on a limited and very selective basis because, again, because they're a distance away, I'm not touching them. Yeah. Obviously, we can talk about how I can affect their cells from a distance, but that's another entire topic of discussion. But, helping them understand and make these philosophical changes and then make these lifestyle changes, absolutely, I know I can help them without even touching them.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, look, I'll be the first one to say, and sometimes for me, it was just mental. So, and they've seen it. My family has all seen it. Ashley standing here, she could tell you right away. I mean, like when we were in Tennessee, and I was starting to feel like garbage. I mean, it's around Christmas time. I'm laying in the bed and, everybody else is out doing stuff. And then, I'm like, oh, I'm going to reach out to Colin. So, sometimes just being able to speak to you, because I had the pain on my side and I'm like, son of a bitch. I said, I'm telling you, I got cancer. They missed this thing or something like that, because that's where your brain goes.
Yeah.
And you're like, no. And you start walking me off it and whatever. And just having the ability to have that reach out was priceless. It was priceless.
Wonderful.
So, to that degree, I mean, I could sit here and talk to you for 9 hours. We're already 20 minutes over the stuff.
Oops.
The website is Dr. Buck Chiropractic, right? But if they forget that, so it's Dr. DRBUCK chiropractic.com. If they search for, and I did this before you came in here, if they search for Colin Buck Chiropractic, they will find you. That's exactly what I did right away. Is it all right if I put the phone number out? Or
absolutely. Please do that. Yeah.
So if you want to call this good-looking man, and his wife is in the office, like my family, his is a family business, you dial 772 772-569-0500. That's 772-569-0500. Dr. Buck, DR, when it's doctor, not the full word, DR Buck, B-U-C-K, chiropractic.com. There's a lot of things I wanted to get into that I didn't even get to. I wanted to talk about the vaccine. I wanted to talk about the danger of anxiety drugs. I mean, we kind of just touched that right there. We just did a story last week about a woman, maybe you heard about this, in Massachusetts. She strangulated her children, 3 young children. She was on 13 different antidepressant postpartum drugs, where it's just like she lost her mind. You look at the family photo, you're like, this is as normal as these people get. It was a beautiful family. The husband goes out. She winds up killing the 3 kids and tried to kill herself. So I mean, 13 different drugs. I mean, how crazy, right?
Correct.
But there's no doubt I'm going to wind up getting the request to have you back. So of course I'll have you back, and of course I'm going to see you all the time because we're not only friends, but you keep me in sanity's path. Sir, wonderful. I thank you so much for coming in here and doing this, and you're a lifesaver.
Thank you so much.
All right, Colin Buck. All right, that's it for me. Make sure you check out Dr. Buck Chiropractic. In fact, what we'll do is we'll put a link on it on DML News app, and we'll put a link on it on the video for people who are watching and not listening. All right, don't forget, we will be with you again tomorrow. Tomorrow we have an interview with Ivory. I can't remember. Ivory Hecker. She is a reporter who got fired from Fox because she was telling the truth about the vaccine. We're going to have her in here. It's going to be an excellent interview. All right. Until the next time, may God bless you, your family, our first responders, our troops, these United States, and Mr. Dr.